Hello everybody, how are you doing? I am finally back with another stream. Yes, I spent a month writing on my novel. It's not finished yet, it's nearly finished. But now I'm back. Sorry I didn't stream anything during that month, just couldn't do it. Now I'm back. I'm on a brand new internet connection. I'm not using Vodafone fucking stupid cable anymore. I am now on fiber. Back on telecom fiber, and I'm very happy about it. And I think it's going to be a lot more stable. So that's going to be awesome. I was having some issues back there with my last stream and stuff. And I'm now back and ready to go. If I'm coughing today a little bit, I'm going to try to do it off mic or muted or whatever. Please excuse that. I'm in quarantine. My wife has managed to get herself infected with SARS-CoV-2, and I think I got it too, although she's doing quite, she's doing better now, but she's having unpleasant symptoms, nothing serious, but nonetheless unpleasant. I'm all right. I've worked today, as you can see by my attire. I did a webinar today, so I'm good. But you know, I'll get a little bit of the sniffles. I've been fighting it for days now, so I think I've gotten infected, but I think I'm fighting it quite well. So just so you know, my voice might be a little bit rougher than usual, and I might be coughing. I'll try to avoid that though. Right, so let's get right into the show. We're recording Private Citizen today. Obviously on Ukraine. What else? I think we'll have to talk about that. And yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's crack straight into it, as Pestily likes to say. What do we got here? How does this work again? How do you podcast? I think this is kind of how you podcast. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, testing. 1, 2, 3. Where's my soundboard? This is my soundboard.
Опачки. Чики-брики, пальчик-выки.
Alrighty. That seems to work. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, testing. 1, 2, 3. Where's my soundboard? This is my soundboard.
Опачки. Чики-брики, пальчик-выки.
Alrighty. That seems to work. Right. All right. So I vote we go straight in. And this is not it's a one-person democracy. You could call it a dictatorship. Let's do this. Let's start this podcast. I'm happy to be back. I will explain everything else that's been going on the show. So let's do this. Let's see if I can still do an intro for this podcast. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. This is episode 109 for Thursday, the 3rd of March, 2022. Agitprop, ahoy! Hello everybody, I'm your host Fab, coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany, out of quarantine. More on that later. Happy to be back. Happy to be here. Happy to have you listening to the show. And I will get right into it. Obviously, we're going to talk about Ukraine today. There really is no other topic right now. It's going to have consequences for all of us. So let's do it. Let's get right into the show. Right, before I start with the actual topic, let's quickly explain. I took a month off writing my novel, which is nearly done. It's not completely done. I've got about 2 chapters to go. When I planned all of this, me being an idiot, I didn't realize that February is the shortest month in the year by far. So I fucked up there a little bit. So I missed a few days, and I was planning to just take the first days of March and just stick it at the end of it and just continue on and finish my novel. That didn't work because my wife started having cold symptoms, and since she works in a hospital, she immediately had to test herself. Of course, she tests herself regularly, of course. And it turns out she was SARS-CoV-2 positive. At which point she told me this on the 1st of March, which incidentally, this was bad timing. I mean, it's not her fault, but this was our 20th anniversary. This not wedding anniversary. We're not married that long, but we've been together for 20 years on that day. And so we want to go out, eating dinner and everything. We didn't manage to do that. I had to instead go out and buy food basically for 2 weeks. And now we're inside and, in quarantine. I didn't test myself. I just assume I'm going to get it from her. I think, I started getting some cold symptoms. So I think she infected me too. She actually has some unpleasant symptoms. She was feeling quite bad. I was joking. It wasn't as bad as my, whenever I got vaccinated, but, basically the same symptoms. Thanks, Fadi, by the way. I'm obviously broadcasting this live on Twitch as usual. Fadi's in chat. Redeemer F saying welcome back. Happy to be there. Thanks for being here too. She's actually feeling she was feeling quite bad yesterday. Today it's better, but she's now getting the cough. We are hoping that everything's going to be fine. She is in a bit of, she's take some medication that means that she's immunosuppressed, which is a bit of an issue. But she's also got 3 vaccinations, so it's looking good. Me, I'm fighting it off. I think we've both been dosing liberally with zinc, obviously, because this also ends up on YouTube. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. Obviously, anybody who's listening to this on a podcast, I think, is smart enough to know that. I think everybody watching on YouTube, because I'm live streaming this on Twitch, uploading the recording afterwards, the live stream to YouTube. I think everybody watching the show is smart enough as well, but I don't think YouTube thinks so. So we have to say that. But we've several years ago, my wife was a cell biologist. Actually, read a paper. She was looking up flu. She was having the flu, and she was like, "What can you actually do when you get the flu?" And she found some stuff, some papers that suggested, there were ongoing studies that taking zinc helps your immune system, and it's kind of debated. It's not really, set in stone. It's also not, people don't really know what the dosage is. But we started whenever we, felt like, you got the throat feeling, whatever you're feeling, cold coming on. We started taking zinc in, as high a doses as we could grab basically at the drugstore. And it's worked for us incredibly well. So over the last 2 years, almost 2.5, maybe 3 years, I've fought off every cold. Usually I just get sick. And now I just start getting the symptoms. I take zinc and it kind of helps. I don't know if that's just, it could just be the placebo effect, to be honest. Who knows? But, I've been doing that as well now, and I'm fighting it off. I had some cold symptoms. I was feeling, yesterday, I was feeling like I'm maybe really getting sick. But I was working yesterday. On Wednesday, I was actually doing a webinar, and then I actually planned to do this podcast yesterday, so on Wednesday, the usual Wednesday. But then I was feeling okay, but it was getting I was feeling some symptoms coming. I was like, I better take it easy. I didn't do the podcast. Today, got up again early, did a webinar, and I'm feeling awesome all day, like normal, And so I've decided to just do this podcast now because, we have to talk about Ukraine. So don't worry about us. We're fine. It's just a bit of a bummer that we have to stay indoors now for a while, but, might as well continue with the novel. But I wanted to get this podcast out. And then I'm back now, right? You can, I'm planning for Wednesday episodes from now on. Again, I'm going to have to do some extra ones, of course, to catch up. So you can once again expect regular episodes, especially with this Ukraine situation. I mean, before we get in that, I might as well talk about that because it's kind of obvious that this is an ongoing situation. So there'll be more episodes about this. Fadi says, I'm glad to hear you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't, everybody's been saying that, but, there was absolutely no, indication why, we're young, we're vaccinated, like, I'm not worried at all, like a little bit because Katie's taking those immunosuppressants, but, also, not a lot of good doctors, so, it's gonna be fine. It's just annoying. But yeah. So Ukraine, obviously, ongoing topic. So I feel like there'll be more episodes about this in the coming weeks and months. So just be prepared about that. I think it's a very important, obviously, geopolitical situation. But it's one big aspect I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, is the propaganda aspect, which is one of my pet peeves, obviously, and which is now in full force. This is the hour of the propagandists. This is a war, which is always when propaganda is at its strongest, which is why I called this episode Agitprop Ahoy, because it's Agitprop's fucking everywhere. I got some examples I can talk about from the German media. So, I don't know how this is going to affect privacy yet, but I've seen some tech angles affecting Russians. So I'm going to talk about that, not on this episode, but probably on a future episode. But we're also going to talk about other episodes. I got a list of stuff I wanted to talk about that I kept in March, but obviously now this is just, once again, something changed, and you're going to have to address this first. But, just so you know, lots of episodes coming. Lots of stuff coming in the future. So just buckle in. I've got some grog. I made myself some grog. I thought maybe a little bit of alcohol now on the upswing. It's gonna help. And also it's gonna help my voice. My voice is a bit rough. Also, if I just cough, I'm gonna try to avoid it. I'm gonna probably try to cut it out of the show. But if I just uncontrollably cough today, I'm sorry about that. It's actually, coughing has been that bad for me, but just so you know, it's a fucking Wuhan flu. What can you do? Yeah, that rhymes. Yes, so let's get into the main topic, and of course, first, I'm gonna have to get something out of the way. I want to explain something about war and my stance on war. This is something that I really feel. If you know me, and if you've been listening to me on podcasts for years now, you probably know this, and you probably assume this. But there's new people listening to this show all the time, and at least that's what I assume based on I'm not collecting that much information on my listeners, but what I can infer from the server data. Lots of people from Russia listen to the show, by the way. I don't know if that's going to change, but it's another reason why I address this topic. But so new people, so I want to explain something so you know where I'm coming from, right? So I'm not a pacifist, I would say. I used to be one when I was very young. When I was younger, I was more naive. I used to think that we should get rid of the German army and stuff like that. I don't believe that anymore, especially after studying politics and history, which you will hear later. I'm going to go into that. You'll hear where I'm coming from there. But I'm not a pacifist. I am, however, I'm a realist, basically. I'm a strong follower of realpolitik, so the Bismarck kind of school of politics as the art of the possible. So I accept that war exists. and that we can't get rid of it. But anyway, I want to make a strong statement here in saying that I'm against any wars, unconditionally. I'm against supporting people who wage wars, either by sending them weapons or sending them money. And by that I mean it doesn't matter on what side they're on. Right? I think this is probably also. I've talked a little bit about this on episode 100, right? So if you go to, I haven't said this today. If you go to the show notes, Private Citizen or Press, obviously episode links is all the episodes. And I did an episode 100 where I talked a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from and stuff like that. And I think I talked about that in that episode. I mean, as a German, I have quite a nuanced view, for example, of World War II, which, of course, I'm very thankful to the UK, the US, and the Russians for defeating the Nazis and liberating Germany. So that already gives me an understanding of why wars sometimes are necessary, even though I'm generally opposed against all wars. But sometimes, I think they have to be fought. But on the other hand, my grandfather was in that war, and he obviously was on the German side. He was in the Waffen-SS. While I obviously don't condone anything the Nazis did, I can't escape the fact that my own grandfather was on the side of the Nazis and suffered greatly in that war. I've only met him a few years before he died, and it was obvious he was an alcoholic. His body, he still had a piece of grenade shrapnel in his body. When I knew him before he died, in his 80s, basically, late 70s, 80s, and he died eventually of complications from that, but also from just fucking alcoholism. I also can't escape the fact that if my grandfather would have been killed in that war, in that justified war, you could say, if he would have been shot by a Russian soldier, then I wouldn't be here today. Simple as that. So I have a nuanced war. I have a nuanced view of these things. Of wars and politics. But generally, of course, I am very much opposed to wars. But I also studied history and politics for a long time. Didn't get a degree, but I spent a lot of time studying it, and I think I learned quite a lot. Wars just are a fact of life, and I think they forever will be. I don't think we'll ever get rid of them. And as Clausewitz, a very smart man, a Prussian like me, once famously said, was the continuation of politics by other means. And that is very, very true. And that is currently exactly what you're seeing in Ukraine. And so I think to understand politics, and by extension history, because, politics turns into history after a few decades, you have to understand war. And you can condemn it. And I personally think you should. Back when I was turning 18, I was going to be conscripted into the German army, where we used to have for a long time as a man, if you had a penis, you had to spend a year in basic training in the army. And I actually objected. You could object and you could do civilian service. And I wanted to do that. And because they declared me unfit for medical reasons, I then, or for a while, and then went to university and started studying. And then they actually wanted to draft me again. And I actually fought that through. So I'm actually what we in Germany call ausgemustert. I am not fit for for military service. Which means if war breaks out, they can call in everybody. If they instate a draft or like a general call to arms, then every male, like the ones who used to be in the army, have to go and join the army, and the other ones who did civilian service have to join civilian help organizations. I'm actually one of the probably, I don't know few percentage points of the German male population who actually, I can do whatever I want. And if you're part of that, but if the war breaks out, they're not going to let you out of the country, right? I can just leave, which I would do if the Russians attack. I'd be the first one out of here. I'm not for patriotism, So I don't consider myself a pacifist, because I would go quite far to protect me and mine, right? I would protect my family. If we'd be attacked right here and you handed me a G36 rifle, I would fucking shoot anybody who comes close. But I would not fight for my country. I think that is dumb. I would fight for people I love, basically. And I would probably try to flee, because, from what I know, from what I've learned from my grandparents, that is the thing to do. If you want to survive, get the fuck out of there. You can call me a coward now, but I can live with that. So yes. But, so I think you should condemn war. But you shouldn't surprise that it's happening. I'm seeing something which the thing I found quite disconcerting. So this has been going on for a week now. And when this war broke out a week ago, the German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, who wanted to be chancellor back in the day, I talked about her. She's the green. She's the woman who said we should store the energy in the grid. So I personally don't think she's very smart. So she was actually on the front line of the conflict. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but she was actually there a few weeks before this broke out. And when it broke out, she was one of the politicians. There were several German politicians, including our chancellor, who basically said this is unprecedented. We cannot understand how this happened. Like, we were really surprised. And I personally think any politician who said that should be fired immediately. Because first of all, as we learned, in the last week, the BND, our exterior intelligence service, obviously knew that the Russians were amassing an army on the border, and they knew this war was going to break out, which was kind of obvious. I don't think you can be chancellor of Germany or foreign minister if you go. I'm surprised by war breaking out. I mean, what the fuck are you doing? I mean. Sorry? Like, these people, so I said controversially, I got a lot of flack for this, but I believe this. I think this is a problem because we elected people who know more about gender policy than they know about foreign policy. And if you actually read the Green Party program for the last election, there's a lot about gender equality in there, and, all that kind of stuff, and very little about diplomacy with the Russians and de-escalating and the war in Ukraine. Because, come on, I mean, first of all, those politicians should be fired. All the journalists should be fired who wrote the headline, "There's war in Europe," right? And some of them, there's like the first war in Europe in 30 years. Like, what the fuck? Like, you didn't notice, like, Yugoslavia? Like, what? The Chechen. I mean, I don't. Okay, is that Europe? Okay, you could argue that, but yeah, I mean, Yugoslavia. Come on. And then the fucking war in Ukraine has been going on for 8 years. This war, I mean, the invasion is new, of course, but this war broke out in 2014. I mean, there were, Baerbock was at the front line in the trenches. They were writing about the fucking trenches in the newspapers. I mean, there's been war in Europe for 8 years. What are you talking about? Like, what is this shit? Who are these people? Why are they so dumb? I think it's either sometimes they're being dumb and sometimes propaganda. It's really hard to figure out right now. Terrestrious Gyms also in chat says, yeah, not fighting seems the sanest, probably healthiest option. Also it's like, it's, you can say it's cowardly. But if you don't want war, right? That's the option, right? Not fighting is the option that you would take. I'm not saying I wouldn't defend myself and my family. Of course I would, as I said, quite vigorously. even if there's no war, I would do that if they're threatened. But you can't have it both ways. But anyway, let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about. I first want to, before I talk about what's going on in Ukraine right now, which is going to be like the shortest segment, I think, because we actually don't know that much from reliable sources. But first I want to talk a little bit about the historic context. Then I want to talk about the geopolitical context, which is the important thing right now. And then we're going to talk about a little bit where we at as of today in this war. So let's first, because I'm a historian and I think everything's based on history and that's very important, let's first look at the historic context. And let's start with something, speaking about propaganda, right? Let's talk about something that is either brazen propaganda or incredibly dumb. So on the 22nd of February, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev posted a meme, basically. This is a picture. I put it in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. Something we have to go into as well. El Terrestrium says it wasn't officially declared war. So that's probably the distinction the press makes. Actually, I don't know if I talked about this on this podcast before. Certainly on previous podcasts. That's actually a thing. There are no officially declared wars in air quotes again anymore, right? So people, one of the things that the press was saying, my colleagues in the press were saying, they likened this to the assault of Hitler on Poland because it's happening in the middle of the night and it was not a declared war. Ever since World War II, there have been no declared wars. Same as we're not like when we're waging a war, right? This isn't like the fucking 1800s anymore. We're not lining up in lines. We're not lining up the infantry in lines, and then some guy goes, shoot! And then everybody, like, they all line up, and then they shoot, and then they reload, and then they shoot again, and then there's another command, and they run at each other with bayonets or whatever. We don't do that anymore. Same way, you're not telling your enemy that you're coming. Nobody's doing that anymore. Also, like this, they attacked in the middle of the night. I mean, seriously, when else? You're not attacking in broad daylight. You want the whole day, so you attack in the morning. I think the lesson we're learning here is that these journalists should listen to more Sabaton songs. Because, you listen to a song like Back in Control, Sabaton explains very clearly why you lay in wait in the night and then you attack in the morning. It's obvious. I mean, you don't have to be military historian to understand these things. It's quite weird. Like, what did they expect the Russians to do? Like, send somebody to parlay first on a horse? Like Putin himself on. Oh, by the way, I would like to declare, sir, that we are in the process of attacking you. So this is a formal declaration of war. I brought it here. It's 3 copies. You can keep one. One we sent to Den Haag, to the Court of Justice or whatever, and one we're keeping. So I'm gonna write back, and then you're gonna have an hour, and then we're gonna start the war. And by the way, we're starting with the bombardment of this city, and then we're moving on to, like, what the fuck? Fadi says, but in Crusader Kings, you always need a casus belli. Well, we can talk about the casus belli in this case. I think, I don't know what this would be called in Crusader Kings, but there definitely is a casus belli where something used to be your territory, right? This would be the case. And not declaring doesn't make the shooting and shelling less deadly. Jim points out, yes, indeed. But anyway, so the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, I put this picture in the show notes, but I'm going to explain it. Private Citizen Press, they posted a meme, which is Kiev 996, Kiev 1011, 1070, 1108, so the years. And there's pictures of, like, the Desatiana Church, St. Sophia's Cathedral, Vidyubichi Monastery, never heard of that, St. Michael's Golden Door Monastery. That's the top row. The bottom row is the same years, and it's Moscow, and there's just a picture of a forest, right? And this is kind of like, Moscow is kind of like Berlin, right? Moscow is a city that was relatively late in history, artificially created pretty much. But this is either very dumb or it's very brazen propaganda. But it's either way it's dumb because it's basically making Putin's case for him. And this is almost stereotypically American. This is like you would. Sorry to all my American listeners, but this is like we in Europe think you Americans behave. You're like, look, Kiev was around in 996, and Moscow wasn't even there yet. Yeah, well, that's because basically back then Kiev was the capital of Russia. Well, not really that, but I'm gonna explain where we're coming from. So I posted this on Twitter as a reply. So if you do not understand this, and why would you? You might not be into Russian history. I just know this because I looked it up and I read about it at some point. Probably heard about it in school, whatever. But back in the ancient times, there was a. If I say state, it's going to be misunderstood. But this was like I'm gonna look this up. So this is like the late 9th century. There was a thing called the Kievan Rus, right? And this is where Kiev takes its name from. It takes the name from Kiev. Kiev was once the capital of Kievan Rus, which was the basis for what later became Russia. So I'm quoting here from Wikipedia a little bit. Kievan Rus was a loose federation of East Slavic, Baltic, and Finnic peoples in Eastern and Northern Europe from the late 9th to the mid-13th century. Under the reign of the Rurik dynasty, founded by the Varangian prince Rurik, founded by the Varangian prince Rurik. Now, the Varangians are Vikings, right? They are the part of the Vikings. There's a good song, again, metal. There's a song by Hulkov, I think, about this. So the Varangians, they crossed the Baltic and went down the rivers, and then went towards the Black Sea, and they started settling what is now Ukraine, and parts of Russia. Yeah, they once again the Vikings raping and pillaging, starting. Actually, Jonathan, hello, Jonathan, also in chat says, was about to say Hulkov, yeah. So you can learn a lot about history by listening to metal. So basically, the Vikings went marauding down there. The modern nations of Belarus, Russia, it's called Russia because of the Rus, and Ukraine all claim Kievan Rus as their cultural ancestors, with Belarus and Russia deriving their names from it. Prior to the emergence of Kievan Rus in the 9th century AD, the lands between the Baltic Sea and Black Sea were primarily populated by Eastern Slavic tribes. Controversy persists over whether the Rus were Varangians or Slavs, with the current scholarly consensus holding that they were an ancestrally Norse people that quickly assimilated into Slavic culture. This uncertainty is due largely to a paucity of contemporary sources. Attempts to address this question instead rely on archaeological evidence, the accounts of foreign observers, and legends and literature from centuries later. To some extent, the controversy is related to the foundation myth of modern states in the region. Sorry, I'm just Jim is saying something here. I like the live feedback, so I'm gonna have a look here. Says in Twitch chat, my favorite story of a tour guide in Cambridge was the answer to an American couple asking if some building or other was or war. I don't even get this building is pre-America. Oh, pre-war. Was pre-war. This building is pre-America. Yes, very much. Sorry, I was misreading it. But anyway, yes. Let's stop making fun of Americans. They're not all like that. But it's also not people's fault. I guess it's the fucking education system, and our education system over here is we're quickly joining the ranks of those. People that get educated these days in Germany are not much better, I feel. Anyway, let's continue with a little bit of this history lesson. The gradual disintegration, so this is how it fell apart, right? I don't really want to go into what Kievan Rus was and what happened there, but the gradual disintegration of the Kievan Rus began in the 11th century after the death of Yaroslav the Wise. If you read this, you can already tell, right? These sound like Russians, because, Slavs, because basically this is what Russia turned into. The position of the Grand Prince of Kiev was weakened by the growing influence of regional clans. The state finally disintegrated under the pressure of the Mongol invasion of Rus, fragmenting it into successor principalities who paid tribute to the Golden Horde, the so-called Tatar yoke. So this is when the Mongols arrived. If you're an American, this is basically the Khal Drogo people from Game of Thrones, right? It's based on the Mongols. In the late 15th century, the Muscovite Grand Dukes began taking over former Kievan territories. So you can hear Muscovite, right? This is where Moscow comes in. Began taking over former Kievan territories and proclaimed themselves the sole legal successor of the Kievan Principality, according to the protocols of the medieval theory of translatio imperii. This is like how the Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire became the German Empire. Or how people said, that's kind of an opinion, basically. On the western periphery, Kievan Rus was succeeded by the Principality of Galicia-Volhynia. Later, as these territories, now part of modern central Ukraine and Belarus, fell to the Gendiminids, the powerful, largely Ruthenized Grand Duchy of Lithuania drew heavily on Rus culture and legal traditions. On the northeastern periphery of Kievan Rus, traditions were adopted. So one of these traditions is like the Prada? Oh God, what was this again? God, now I have to look this up. Kievan. Ruskaya Pravda, which is kind of like it's like a legal tradition, right? It's like the Carolingian legal code in Germany. It's like basically what a lot of the Russian legal tradition is based on, if I understand this correctly. On the northeastern periphery of Kievan Rus, traditions were adapted in the Vladimir Suzdal Principality that gradually gravitated towards Moscow. To the very north, the Novgorod and Pskov feudal republics were less autocratic than Vladimir Suzdal Moscow until they were absorbed by the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Russian historians consider Kievan Rus the first period of Russian history. And this is the important point. It is the territory of where modern Ukraine is, or largely modern Ukraine is where basically Russian culture started, when the Vikings came and mixed with the Slavs. And this is all long before anything called Ukraine existed, right? Because in stark contrast to this, Ukraine as a state, oh God, I got a typo in the show notes, I just noticed. I don't even have the source for the show notes open. You can tell I haven't done this in a while. I'm not prepared. So I'm going to have to waffle here a little bit, because if I don't do this now, I'm going to completely forget about this. So let's fix the show notes on the go. Right. So, contrasting this, Ukraine as a state only exists since 1917. And for a modern nation state that is incredibly young. And I say that as a German. The German nation state was founded in 1871. So there were a lot of people who considered themselves German before, for centuries, but a state, Germany, is very young, which caused a lot of problems in history. Basically caused 2 world wars, because the Germans were hundreds of years behind of having their own nation state, and then they, compensated by being overeager. Or that is my reading of history. So Ukraine is fairly young. And there was a Ukrainian state, and they tried to, so after World War I, when the Russian Revolution was happening, Ukraine tried to win its independence in the Soviet-Ukraine War from 1970 to 1971, but eventually they lost, and the Bolsheviks, so back then it wasn't really the Soviets yet, it was the Bolsheviks, they won, and they conquered Ukraine, and they integrated it. And basically, modern Ukraine exists because Lenin, not John Lennon, right? Lenin, the Russian, the socialist thinker and statesman. Lenin recognized the Ukrainian national spirit that was growing strong. And he, when integrating Ukraine he didn't make it a part of Russia. So the Soviets made it a socialist republic, an independent socialist republic, as part of the USSR. And this is going to be important later. So this is how Ukraine basically came to be. Because if the Russians had just destroyed, if this would have been the Tsars, right, they would have probably crushed all resistance and tried to stamp out the Ukrainian national spirit, deported everybody who was in the street protesting that Ukraine should be their own country, and Ukraine would now just be a territory of Russia. But because the Bolsheviks were, they were very realpolitik minded people, and they didn't care so much about nationalities really as they cared about classes. They made it its own independent country, which is why when the Soviet Union fell apart, it became its own country. But anyway, let's read a little bit from Wikipedia on this. So about the Soviet-Ukrainian War, the end of the war saw the incorporation of most of the territories of Ukraine into the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, which on December the 30th, 1922, was one of the founding members of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. Parts of Western Ukraine fell under the control of the Polish Republic as laid out in the Peace of Riga. For the next few years, the Ukrainian nationalists would continue to try to wage a partisan guerrilla war on the Soviets. They were aided by Polish intelligence, see Prometheism, however, they were not successful. The last active Ukrainian movements would be mostly eradicated during the Holodomor. That was the genocide on the Ukrainian people where Stalin starved them all to death, pretty much, because he was okay, you have all the wheat, we need the wheat in Moscow, you're going to starve. Now, there's this claim, this Russian propaganda about Nazis in Ukraine. Of course, there are Nazis everywhere. But this goes down to, in the World War II, actually, some Ukrainian nationalists fought with the Nazis. And they actually, perversely enough, there were battalions that included Jewish soldiers who actually were killing Jews. They were gassing Jews and shooting them, but they were made up of, a significant amount of Jewish people themselves. Then later, when they saw that the Nazis wouldn't liberate Ukraine, actually turned. So these Ukrainian nationalists turned on the Nazis and then fought with the Soviets against the Nazis later. But still, there's still a that organization that was founded back then still exists and played an active role also in the Euromaidan protest, which we're going to talk about later a little bit. So keep that in mind. History just there's these threads that you have to follow. Jonathan says, I don't think it is too relevant for contemporary events. Latvia is similar, young, and it's fine on its own. It's just tiny, nobody cares about it. Looking forward to where this goes, though. Well, yeah, it's not a judgment to say that this country is young. It's for context, right? We were joking earlier with Jim about the or Fadi, I think, with the casus belli, right? So there is a feeling that sometimes you can turn over these things. Like in history, people get the idea, right? This country is really young. We could roll this back. We could. It used to be a part of our country, and let's capture it again. And I think that is a big part of the Russian impetus in this case. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Important to remember, so the modern Ukrainian state, like Russia, is deriving its origins and its culture from Kievan Rus. But the actual Ukrainian state obviously was founded in 1991 after the Soviet Union fell apart. And that's the state that is currently being attacked by Russia. But it's important to understand that, something the U.S. embassy didn't understand, or I don't know, didn't want to understand. I don't know something, or wanted to overplay with their propaganda, was that back in the day, there used to be no Russia, and there used to be no Ukraine, and Kiev used to be the capital of something called the Kievan Rus, and that is where Russian culture developed from. And of course, there was basically Ukrainian culture. So the people who lived there in Kiev, who were Russians for a time or whatever, proto-Russians or and then later on also Russians for a time, they at some point developed their own national spirit, which people seem to do, and that's where this conflict is coming from. Let's move on from history, and let's talk about what brought us to this war. And this is something I used to have a professor when I was studying history who basically banked it in our heads in every talk he gave. It's all about geopolitics. Actually, my wife, I remember my wife was actually in one of the courses. I used to visit her courses sometimes in uni, and when she came to Bonn, in Düsseldorf, even when I was in school, she was studying in Düsseldorf back at the time, and I visited her courses, and then we moved together in Bonn, and I still sometimes went to her course because I found biology interesting. Back in the day, you could do that, right? You could just go. I don't know, probably not how it works today. Today, everything's regulated and counted and whatever, even before the pandemic. But she used to sometimes visit history classes I was taking, and she was actually laughing because the guy was afterwards. She was like, we were going to a cafe or whatever. She's like, what is this guy kept saying geopolitics? I didn't even know that was a word. Like geopolitics, very important. Because that's very important, we're now going to talk about the geopolitical context. Oh, and there's another disclaimer I wanted to actually get out of the way in the beginning, which I forgot about. One thing, I always like to make clear where I'm coming from, right? Because we all have our biases. I've talked about this a lot. So just to make very clear where I'm coming from, just by virtue of my path in life, I know no Ukrainians. I don't think I've actually spoken to a lot of Ukrainians in my life. I know one person who is half Ukrainian, half Russian, but that's obviously a very different situation she's in, so I don't count her as a purely Ukrainian. And the only other Ukrainian people I ever talked to, as far as I know, are when I was on the road and on the side of the Autobahn. Sometimes, I just spend a few hours there or half an hour, whatever, to recover from driving because I drive a lot, and it's just good to do so you don't kill yourself. I sometimes talk to truckers because I like truckers, and there are a lot of Ukrainian truckers. So I talked to quite a few Ukrainian truckers in my life, but that's basically it. On the other hand, I know a lot of Russians. Good friend in school of mine, she was Russian. I still remember going to her place on the weekend, and we had this assignment we had to do over the weekend for school, and we were in groups of two, and I was doing it with her. So she was like, oh, come over for breakfast, and I'll introduce you to my family. And I went over there, and I get there for breakfast, and what I see is people eating raw fish and drinking vodka for breakfast. They were like, here, have a vodka. I was like, I don't know what that was. That like 11th grade, no, 12th grade or something. I don't know. So I know a lot more Russians than Ukrainians. Just to point out, I might be biased towards Russians. Also, I play the Russian faction in Escape from Tarkov. So much for that. Jonathan says, if you want to talk to some, I have some coworkers that probably would be up for an interview. Definitely. You can set that up. You have my contact data. We're going to talk about Ukraine for a long time here. And I would love to have, I would love to have input from somebody from Ukraine on this whole situation. If you can set that up, please do. I'd be very grateful for that. Anyway, let's go into the geopolitical context. This is obviously how I see things, obviously. But, I think ever since the Cold War has ended, NATO has been very clearly expanding its political influence eastwards, and they're trying to make countries part of NATO and of their sphere of influence, which used to be in the Russian sphere of influence and quite firmly in the grip of Russia in the Cold War. And I think the aim here is to minimize Russia's sphere of influence. And basically, I think what they're trying to do is, you have to understand, this is very important. This is what many people don't understand. The USSR, so the Soviet Union, wasn't like Russia, right? There was a federation. It was like basically the Russian state. And then there were independent countries, like republics usually, as we just talked about, the Ukrainian Socialist Republic, the Polish People's Republic. These were part of the USSR, which was like a kind of like, I don't know, it's not like states in the US, but for all intents and purposes, that was like the state, right? The USSR was comparable to the US, but they weren't Russian. They were part of Russia, right? Like half of Germany used to be like a socialist republic. That wasn't part of Russia, but it belonged to the USSR. And this is something Stalin very deliberately did. Taking a cue from Lenin, he realized in realpolitik, when he was consolidating the Soviet state, when Lenin had died, and he was like, actually, people were starving, and he had a lot of problems because their government was shit, because, basically the socialists put people, I think I talked about this in the socialism episode at some point, they put people into the government who had fucking no idea. They were like writers, they were like journalists, and they said like, you are now in charge of feeding the people, and they were idiots, and they didn't know how to do it, so they had a lot of problems. But what Stalin did is he realized that he couldn't make these countries part of Russia, but he couldn't make them independent per se and give them, with that came their right to govern themselves in certain guidelines, right? And make them part of the Soviet Union. And what he did is he created, if you look at Russia on the map, he created a ring of like buffer countries around Russia. The so-called Iron Curtain was like the border to that, right? So it extended to East Germany. And I've created, because I couldn't find, for my life, I couldn't find an illustration that showed this. And I literally spent 2 fucking hours today because, the fucking NATO expansion and everything is very, very complicated. So I think I've sorted it out now. I've created an illustration on data mapper. There's a picture in the show notes, and you can click on it, and you get the interactive data mapper version, where you can highlight the countries, and it tells you what country it is. But if you look at it, if you look at this picture in the show notes, and I'm trying to explain this if you listen to the podcast, but you'll have to look at this basically. What you see in red is Russia. These are the countries as they exist today. So you have Russia, and then in orange you have Ukraine, which is where currently the war is being fought. And then you have 2 countries in dark orange, and those. So aside from the USSR, there was also the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was a military alliance like NATO that included some countries that weren't in the USSR but were, Soviet aligned. And so we have Belarus. Actually, I need the fucking thing where I can highlight I need the interactive version. So you have what is today is Moldova and Belarus, and they actually, I think Belarus was part of Russia. I think actually part of the Russian. Anyway, so these are I labeled them for easier understanding. They're like formerly Warsaw Pact countries, and then you have a ring of brown countries. And you have a little red thing up there that is the Russian enclave. Is that what's it called? Is that Königsberg? I always get that. Is that still called Königsberg? Now I have to look this up on Google Maps because I always get that wrong. Kaliningrad. Sorry, Kaliningrad. Wasn't that called Königsberg? So I studied. The 1900s, the 1800s mostly. It used to be called Königsberg, so I always know the old names. Anyway, so that's part of Russia. It's like a Russian enclave, which they actually can't get to right now by air because it's locked down. But you have this ring of that I colored brown, the brown countries. And these are countries that used to be in the Warsaw Pact. These are the buffer countries, right? Okay, the Baltic countries actually used to be part of the Soviet Union up there, but now I labeled them Warsaw Pact because Soviet Union wasn't in the Warsaw Pact, so it's correct. So these are the buffer countries mostly, like Poland. I've colored Germany green because Germany obviously was cut in half, and the east part was Warsaw Pact, and the west part was NATO. 2 countries, the German Federal Republic and the German Democratic Republic, so the socialist state. And these brown countries this is the buffer zone, right? So basically what Stalin did, what the Russians did here was like, if there's a conventional war, like if nuclear war bets off, if there's a conventional war, we have learned from history, World War II, Napoleon, all that shit, that if they get to the border of Russia and then attack from there, you can get to Moscow way too quickly, especially with tanks. So we need this buffer zone, right? These are basically countries that we can give up on, that will get invaded. And by the time it takes them to drive their fucking tanks through there, even if they completely catch us off guard, we can mobilize and we can kick them back. Because, again, Sabaton, Defense of Moscow, it's actually a song by Radio Tapok, I think. It's a cover. Still a great song, Moscow will never fall. So we can do that. Interestingly, NATO basically had the same plan with Germany, which is why I always when I hear about NATO defending Germany, I find it's kind of a joke, because their official plan in the Cold War was basically to give up the northern German lowlands, so the Norddeutsche Tiefebene, which is basically if you look at the map of Germany, like the bottom half is full of mountains, or some mountains, and then the top half is very flat. That's where Schleswig-Holstein is, Lower Saxony, Hamburg, Bremen, East Frisia, all of that. Basically all of that up to Berlin, and they would have given all of that up, and everything east of the Fulda Gap. So the Fulda Gap is like a gap in the mountains down in south. In the middle of Germany there, but in the south, where you can basically, that's where you would drive the tanks through if you're attacking from, what would that be, what's now the Czech Republic, right? If you come in from there. So they would have basically given up half of Germany. And I still think that, as far as I know, even after the Cold War, this is the operational plan from NATO. This is why the big U.S. base is in Frankfurt, because from there you're defending the Fulda Gap, right? And there are no real, there's a training base in the Lüneburg Heath, but there are no bases in the northern lowlands, right? Because you just give that up. That's just like your buffer zone. We're talking conventional war, and that would still be the NATO defense of Germany. So we'd be giving up half of the country, because Eastern Germany is not part of Germany, and Berlin, obviously. This is why not the capital was always Berlin, but that's why the government used to be in Bonn, right, in the west, because you want to defend that. You can defend that. Sorry, it's always been a joke to me. But anyway, so that's why Germany's green on this map. You have blue is like the original. That's like the NATO countries, during the Cold War. And then you have some lighter blue countries. This is like, this used to be like mostly Yugoslavia, which obviously fell apart. And some of the countries joined NATO. So if you look at this map, everything that's orange, red, and brown in the Cold War used to be Russian. This used to be the Russian sphere of influence. Right? Everything that's blue used to be NATO, except the light blue ones. Right? That used to be all unaligned, neutral. And Germany obviously was cut in half. So now you can see that basically, if you're Russian and you're thinking like purely, you're not thinking humanitarian and you don't want wars, you're thinking geopolitically. You're like, a war could break out and we need to defend our country. And we're talking purely conventional war here. Then what the line of defense moved from where the Iron Curtain was. So basically let's say Germany's united. Let's take Germany out. It basically moved from the eastern border of Germany, right? So from the Polish-Czech border, that's where the line of defense used to be, to now Ukraine and Belarus, right? And the Russians. When I say the Russians, I mean some Russians. Obviously there's lots of Russians opposed to this war. I'm betting a lot of them are listening to this podcast, but for easier, I'm not blaming all of the Russians, obviously, but if you're thinking as somebody who's a Russian military strategist, if you're thinking like Vladimir Putin, you're thinking what you want to do is you don't want Russia splintered apart after the Soviet Union fell apart. Like the sphere of influence, not Russia. Russia is, almost. I mean, Ukraine is right, but let's look at the Soviet Union. Russia is pretty much the same size, but what they lost is all the buffer countries. So all the parts that used to be part of the Soviet Union. And then lots of people are saying Putin wants to reinstate the Soviet Union. I don't think he wants to. I think that's wildly unrealistic. And I think the guy is, if anything, he's scrupulous and an asshole. But I think he is very, very realistic. He is a realpolitik guy, which is what he has, I feel, in common. I think he's playing a whole different chess game than people like Olaf Scholz, who have no idea what they're saying. Like, either they were surprised by this, or for some reason they're pretending they're surprised by this war. So, Putin's playing on a whole another level. You could argue that Merkel knew what she was doing, but I don't think the current European politicians know what they're doing. For that matter, I don't think Joe Biden does. But, that's another discussion for another day. But I think he knows that that's not possible, right? You cannot get Poland back, right? You cannot get Hungary back, stuff like that, the Czech Republic. And I don't think he wants to. I think when Ukraine was in danger of now also flipping and are also becoming brown, for that matter. And we're saying, okay, then it's Ukraine, and then it's Belarus, and then NATO is basically on the border of Russia. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. We had one of our Russian producers pointing out that, of course, NATO always had a direct border with Russia up there, Finland, right, and also in Germany. The inner German border was the direct border between Germany, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. But I think here people they're also misunderstanding the difference between the Soviet Union and Russia. So, I don't think Putin wants to reinstate the Soviet Union. What he wants is the same sphere of influence and security that the Soviet Union gave Russia. And I think there's a lot of propaganda where everybody in the media now here, at least in Germany, is going, it's Putin. It's all Putin's fault. It's Putin. Which I think is dumb and short-sighted. Because if you ask me why this happened, is in 2014, there were protests in Ukraine. And I think the EU and the US and NATO supported regime change in Ukraine. Because at the time, Ukraine was aligning itself with the European Union and with NATO. And then there was an election, and they had a new president, and the president was rather Russian-friendly. And if you're Ukraine, you're right between the European Union and Russia. So you have two choices. You can do all your trade with if you're not going to go neutral, which is hard to do in this situation, because you're not Switzerland, and you're not sitting on tons of Nazi gold and hiding in the mountains, then you have to align yourself either with Russia, do your trade chiefly with Russia, or with Europe. And so they had a new president that was elected who was more Russia-friendly. And then we had protesters. And what amounts to a revolution, back in the day it was called Euromaidan. Now it's called the Revolution of Dignity or something. I've ever heard a propaganda term. By the way, full disclaimer, back in the day, I was completely on board with this. I thought it was a great idea. I think I said so. We talked about this on Linux Outlaws back in the day. I was naive and dumb, right? I'm prepared to admit that that was a huge mistake. Kind of like I was seeing the Arab Spring very positively, like not seeing at all the geopolitical consequences it would have and all the other stuff down the road, which, of course, in hindsight, you're always smarter, but maybe I'm now also older. I don't know. I feel like these days I wouldn't have been that up on it. But basically what happened is NATO and the EU supported this revolution, which made sense because, the revolution wanted to align the country with our interests. And this kicked off a whole chain of events. This caused, well, it didn't cause, but what Russia did in response was seizing Crimea, which is a very historic move. They did that in 1700 something, the Krim-Krieg, the Crimea War. I've done this before. So they did that, and this, of course, started a war in eastern Ukraine, which has been going on ever since, which, the West has been largely ignored, The West woke up to this war momentarily when Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was shot down by Russian separatists, the book incident. But after that, again, who fucking cares about Ukraine, right? If you're Germany, I mean, okay, there's wheat coming from there, but, not much else. And you're like, who cares? We got more important stuff to do. We got gender politics to take care of. We got to change our energy politics and everything, and then the virus and everything. So last week, when Russia invaded, the rest of Ukraine, with a very classical casus belli, really. I mean, what they did is like, when they seized, they were very smart and very. I mean, they didn't want to start an all-out war, so they basically sent soldiers in. Took the patches off the uniforms and were like, these are not Russians. And then they basically, I mean, in eastern Ukraine there is a significant rebel presence, right? There was people who wanted to break away from eastern Ukraine. There's been documented for decades that there's a sentiment of people there who feel like they're disenfranchised by the government in the West, in the western part of Ukraine. They think like they're not getting enough support, not enough money, and they want to align themselves with Russia. So these people formed militias, and Russia basically gave them weapons, and then it's a classic Cold War. I don't even, what do you call this? In German, we call this Stellvertreterkrieg. I have to look this up. A proxy war. I know this because before I looked this up. Proxy war, yes. Classic Cold War proxy war, right? And of course, now the casus belli now was the independent republics, just like the Luhansk and the other independent republic, the rebel republics, they basically asked Russia, the Russian Federation, to recognize them as sovereign republics and, join the Russian Federation or whatever. And Russia said yes, and they said, well, okay, you're in a war with Ukraine, now we have to help you, now we're invading. And they were like, it's not a war, it's a special operation. Propaganda, of course. Jonathan says that's what I thought. I don't know what in response to, but to think about how the US would react if Germany kicked them out of Rammstein. See, my approach, if you're going to have a very quick discourse on what German defense policy should look like, I think Germany has no chance to defend itself for obvious reasons that I just laid out. In a conventional war against Russia. This is something that Bismarck knew. Bismarck said the first primacy in German foreign politics always have to be on friendly terms with Russia. Whatever you do, you have to make sure Russia is okay with it. We're talking wars and stuff like that. And that is true today. So we can't defend ourselves. I mean, we're way too small. It's like Ukraine. You can hold out for a while, but they'll just overrun you. And, with this current state of our military, we could even hold out for a while. Let's be honest. I mean, really, this actually scared me. And this was a scandal of epic proportions that once again the media quickly reported, but actually didn't go into. When this war broke out, the head of the German armed forces says, basically, we're caught with our pants down. They've been cutting our budget for 20 years. We're fucked. That's what you want. The war breaks out close by, and your military goes, we're out of here. We got no chance. If anybody, they didn't even say if the Russians attack, because we all know we don't have a chance. But basically, I don't know if the Polish attack now, we're fucked. Like, that's what you want. So my German defense thing would be get the Americans, and they would never do this, but get the Americans to vacate all bases in Germany. No U.S. soldiers on German soil, and just leave us the nukes and the launch codes, of course. And then we just cut our military. We could do a thing like Japan, where we don't really have a military, where they're just not set up to go out into other countries. They're just a civil defense force with like tanks. So we have like a defense force, right? So, but we write that in our constitution, like we solidify the article that says Germany should never be in a war in another country, not even an attack war. We should never be in a war in another country. We don't have an army. We just have a defense force, and then we just do nuclear deterrence. And we're like, okay, if you attack us, we're just going to nuke everything. I think that's what we should do. And if we are so trusted allies of the Americans, as they always say, they would trust us with the fucking nukes. El Terrestrium says Germany wouldn't be able to defend against Liechtenstein in war right now. I think, I've been to Liechtenstein. I think we could. I mean, we have 3 Leopard 2 tanks that work. There are only 3, but you could park them in a line, and basically that's the border to Liechtenstein. You could probably drive over Liechtenstein, just flatten all the houses in one tank. So. Yeah, I think we could take Liechtenstein, but everything else, I don't know if that's gonna do it, to be honest. But I mean that would be my defense strategy. But what we're doing now, of course, is I'm gonna talk about this now. Yeah, so basically the German response is we're going to put 2 billion into the army right now. Right? Okay, so in like 3 years we have enough tanks or whatever. And then we're going to increase our defense spending to what Trump actually wanted us to spend for NATO. So we're going to do that. And now we're shipping weapons to Ukraine. Right? All the fucking... There's several politicians in the government right now who claim to be pacifists. They're now, no, we're shipping weapons to Ukraine. I mean, I don't understand. I read an article. There was an article the other day in the German Tagesschau, which is like our biggest, that's like our 8 o'clock news, a big thing, right? Public broadcasting, we're all paying for it. And this just floored me. They basically had somewhat of an opinion article where they said there's a sea change with pacifists and freedom activists in Germany because they're now supporting shipping weapons to Ukraine. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, whoever wrote that, I don't call for people's heads off, but they need to be fired. Like, you can't be a journalist and write nonsense like this. Like, not for Tagesschau. I mean, how dumb who signed off on this? What the fuck? Like, you literally can't be a pacifist and support shipping weapons to a war zone. That is, like, the definition of pacifist is not doing that. Or freedom. How can you be, like, a peace activist? How can you be a peace activist and support shipping weapons to a war? I mean, there's absolutely no question if this war is justified or the defense is justified. That doesn't even play into it. You're a peace activist. You want peace. You cannot get peace if you ship weapons somewhere. Right? You can say, right, I support the Allied effort in World War II. Completely justified. Like, you can say that was morally justified. It was morally right. We had to beat Hitler no matter what it took. But, like, you're talking millions of casualties. Like, millions of civilian casualties. I mean, you can say that's justified, but you cannot say that's justified and also claim to be a pacifist. That just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. Right? That's like me saying I'm a anti-fossil fuel activist, but I'm driving around on my motorcycle every day. Like, what the fuck? I mean, there's like dumb bullshit. This is propaganda. Stuff like that is propaganda. I don't think even it's dumb. It is brazen propaganda. What it does is it's getting people who have qualms about sending weapons, because we talked about this in Germany for decades, and we just got out of Afghanistan. We just thought we're done with this shit. We learned in Yugoslavia, we learned in Afghanistan that it's not what we want to do, to fight wars, to send weapons to countries. We don't want that. Like, these fucking politicians who just signed off on this, they were going on about we need to curb, like, our fucking government, the one I praised for a while there, right? In their coalition thing, says they want to cut weapons exports of Germany to zero. Now they're I don't know, 3 months into the government, or like 5, they're shipping weapons to Ukraine. Like, what the actual fuck? And it's all propaganda. Another article I read, I think it was also in Tagesschau, it was like completely pure propaganda. It was like basically why the BND is so great. It was an article that it was not even labeled as an opinion piece. It was labeled as investigative reporting, which was just one guy espousing why the BND is so great because the BND called this attack. And I was like, all right, if the BND called this attack, why were all our head politicians, why was the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany surprised of this war? If his own fucking intelligence service called this a week or 2 weeks ahead of time. Like, did he just like skip the meeting? Like, what the fuck is this bullshit? How are people like reading this? Sorry, I'm ranting, but it's just driving me insane. How can you just swallow this shit, hook, line, and sinker? How dumb do you have to be? I mean, it's fucking obvious. It's obvious this is like pro-war propaganda. I mean, come on. Jesus. And I'm okay, just to be clear. I'm okay. Somebody saying we need to support Ukraine. This was a cowardly, illegal, whatever you want to call it, attack by Putin, by the Russians. We need to stop them, right? But I don't want you to then ever again claim you're a pacifist or you're against war, because you're not. What we should have done here is in the last fucking 10 years, or at least in the last 8 years, while the war was going on in Ukraine, ever since the Russians annexed Crimea, we should have had like strong diplomatic effort to sort this shit out, to diffuse this tension. Now we need strong diplomatic efforts. Germany's doing shit. The French, actually Macron, you can say about him whatever you want, he's fucking talking to Putin. He's like, I'm not gonna cut ties. I'm gonna talk to this guy. That's the only thing you can do if you want peace. We need fucking, I'm not saying capitulate, right? I'm not saying say what he did was great. I'm just saying you can say we're all against this, the wrong thing. But rather than send weapons, you need to, like, because this is just going to have more people dead. I mean, it's not like Ukraine can win this war if the Russians don't stop. Like, we can send them every fucking tank we have in Germany, every fucking Leopard, every fucking Panzerhaubitze, every last anti-aircraft rocket from the NVA, old, East German army, everything. We can send them every hand grenade, every fucking bullet of 919 Parabellum we fucking have. They're not going to win this war if the Russians, just look at history. Just look at the last 200 years and how many wars Russia in its very incarnation has fought, and how many they won, how many they lost. They lost, like, in the last 200 years, they lost, like, clear losses, like maybe 3 wars. They won 2 fucking world wars. Like, not to mention that this is like really stupid, because if we're really stupid, like some Americans, some Americans right now are really stupid. They're saying we need an anti-fly zone over Ukraine, right? You know what? So what they mean is like we want U.S. fighter planes, probably from bases in Germany or in Poland, or whatever, to make sure the Russians cannot fly planes over Ukraine. You know what that means, right? You're going to send a tornado there. The Russians are going to send the MiG because Putin knows what he's doing. He's got bigger balls than you. He's going to fly into that territory, and then you have one choice with your tornado or your fucking F-16. You can either put your tail behind your legs and be embarrassed and go home and have Putin win, right? Or you can shoot that fucking plane down. And the moment you do that, it's a declaration of war. And then you have a declaration of war between the US and Russia on your hands, which are nuclear powers, right? And then very quickly, we're going to have a nuclear war. And then I don't have to finish this fucking book I'm writing, which is set in a nuclear wasteland, because then we're going to have that in reality. It's just like, why can't people think that far? And I have to say, credit where credit's due. I haven't linked this in the show notes. You can search this, whatever. But like, there was an article in the New York Times, of all places, where the New York Times went, this is dumb, because if we have a no-fly zone, we're gonna have to shoot that plane down, and then we have a nuclear war on our hands. And if the New York Times says this, they're as far from my opinion as you can get, right? Why are people so fucking short-sighted? Jonathan says, I mean, I'm pretty pacifist, but if I see a kid beat another kid with a stick, I'm going to give the beaten kid a stick too. Depends, right? What we're basically talking about here is you see a kid being shot with a Glock by another kid, you're giving him a stick. Right? Which is a bad example. Because basically what we're doing is we're prolonging this fucking war. A war Ukraine can't win. But I'm going to talk about that later. Anyway. I just want to quote something here, because a lot of text, but I think this is very important. So I can talk to you about this, and I can rant till I'm blue in the face. But what I basically think is what happened here is the war is solely to be blamed on Russia, and probably on Vladimir Putin. Putin is the one who signed off on this. He's at fault for attacking, for creating this crisis, this humanitarian crisis, this unspeakable tragedy. But that doesn't mean that the EU and NATO aren't also. I wouldn't say that they're not responsible for the war, but they helped create the climate, that made this war possible. And because of all the propaganda in the mainstream media, as far as I can tell, this is largely being ignored. And I want to talk about this, which is not going to make me very popular, but I think it's very important. But anyway, I'm not the only person who thinks this. There was a very good opinion piece written by Ted Galen Carpenter, who is like a fellow for foreign policy at the Cato Institute, and he wrote a very good opinion piece in an online magazine called 1945. But I found this because this was also published in The Guardian, and I was amazed that this was in The Guardian. So kudos to The Guardian, who's also very far generally from what I think about many things, including this war, for publishing this. And I'm going to read you the most important parts of this, because I really think this has to be read out, because he says it a lot better than I do. Anyway. So, Ted Galen Carpenter on this war. Russia's military offensive against Ukraine is an act of aggression that will make already worrisome tensions between NATO and Moscow even more dangerous. The West's new Cold War with Russia has turned hot. Vladimir Putin bears primary responsibility for this latest development, but NATO's arrogant, tone-deaf policy towards Russia over the past quarter century deserves a large share as well. Analysts committed to U.S. foreign policy of realism and restraint have warned for more than a quarter century that continuing to expand the most powerful military alliance in history towards another major power would not end well. The war in Ukraine provides definitive confirmation that it did not. Quote, many Russians see NATO as a vestige of the Cold War, inherently directed against their country. They point out that they have disbanded the Warsaw Pact, their military alliance, and ask why the West should not do the same. End quote. This is like quoting some historian, I think. It was an excellent question, and neither the Clinton administration nor its success. I mean, I cut out some stuff out of this, but yeah, he goes on about how Clinton basically started this whole thing by pushing for NATO expansion eastwards. After the Cold War ended. It was an excellent question, and neither the Clinton administration nor its successors provided even a remotely convincing answer. George Kennan, the intellectual father of American containment policy during the Cold War, perceptively warned in a May 2nd, 1998 New York Times interview about what the Senate ratification of NATO's first round of expansion would set in motion. Quote, I think it is the beginning of a new Cold War, Kennan stated. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely and it will affect their policies. I think it's a tragic mistake. There was no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else. Except like a power grab, right? It was a power grab, and it still is. He was right, but US and NATO leaders proceeded with new rounds of expansions, including the provocative step of adding the 3 Baltic republics. Those countries not only had been part of the Soviet Union, but they had also been part of Russia's empire during the Tsarist era. That wave of expansion now had NATO perched on the border of the Russian Federation. Moscow's patience with NATO's ever more intrusive behavior was wearing thin. The last reasonably friendly warning from Russia that the alliance needed to back off came in March 2007 when Putin addressed the annual Munich Security Conference. Quote, NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders, Putin complained. NATO expansion, quote, represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust. And we have the right to ask against whom is this expansion intended? Typical Putin rhetoric there. And what happened to the assurances our Western partners made after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact? As Necros pointed out in the forum, one of our Russian producers, of course, as I said earlier, NATO always had a common border with the Warsaw Pact. Well, common borders, to be honest. So that's a bit of, that's not right. That's, it's just a bit of propaganda, pretty much. But it's obviously it's coming from both sides. So one thing I want to make clear, I agree with most of this. One thing I want to make clear is I'm not blaming countries like, the Baltic republics. They're tiny, right? And it used to be Russia. So they want to be independent. So their only choice is to ask for NATO membership, right? I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming NATO for granting them NATO membership. And you could have probably granted the Baltic republics or just Poland or whatever, but like continuing to just do it, it's just dumb. I mean, it's obviously dumb. It's like short-sighted. Anyway, continuing in this article. The following year, the Kremlin demonstrated that its discontent with NATO's continuing incursions into Russia's security zone, so that's the buffer states I was talking about, that Stalin created, into Russia's security zone had moved beyond verbal objections. Moscow exploited a foolish provocation by Georgia's pro-Western government to launch a military offensive, war in Europe, to launch a military offensive that brought Russian troops to the outskirts of the capital. Thereafter, Russia permanently detached 2 secessionist-minded Georgian regions and put them under effective Russian control. So they've been doing this since 2008, right? So the thing they were doing in Ukraine in 2014, they've done in 2008 in Georgia. Western, especially US leaders, continue to blow through red warning light after red warning light, however. The Obama administration's shockingly arrogant meddling in Ukraine's internal political affairs in 2013 and 14 to help demonstrators overthrow Ukraine's elected pro-Russia president was the single most blatant provocation, and it caused tensions to spike. Moscow immediately responded by seizing and annexing Crimea, and a new Cold War was underway with a vengeance. You could argue it's a hot war, but it's basically that was until last week, that was a proxy war, which interestingly in the Cold War never escalated, right? Things have changed. Events during the past few months constituted the last chance to avoid a hot war in Eastern Europe. Putin demanded that NATO provide guarantees to several security issues. Specifically, the Kremlin wanted binding assurances that the alliance would reduce the scope of its growing military presence in Eastern Europe and would never offer membership to Ukraine, which I think is reasonable. He backed up those demands with a massive military buildup on Ukraine's borders. Smart realpolitik move. The Biden administration's response to Russia's quest for meaningful Western concessions and security guarantees was tepid and evasive. Putin then clearly decided to escalate matters. Washington's attempts to make Ukraine a NATO political and military pawn, even absent the country's full membership in the alliance, may end up costing the Ukrainian people dearly. History will show that Washington's treatment of Russia in the decades following the demise of the Soviet Union was a policy blunder of epic proportions. It was entirely predictable that NATO expansion would ultimately lead to a tragic, perhaps violent, breach of relations with Moscow. Perceptive analysts warned of this likely consequence, but those warnings went unheeded. We are now paying the price for the U.S. foreign policy establishment's myopia and arrogance. And I think this is true, except I also blame Europe, right? Because, of course, the Americans are going to play chess in Europe, but we, for example, Germany, basically the leader of Europe, now that, especially of the European Union, now that the UK has left, it's our responsibility to sort this out. Even if the US is pushing for that, we should have told them. Merkel is at fault here too as well. She should have curbed US expansion there. She should have stopped escalating. And we need diplomacy. And it's quite telling that experts are saying that this is not so much of a surprise, because apparently diplomatic contacts between the West and Russia, Germany, the US, and Russia, apparently were a lot worse in the last 10 years than they have ever been during the Cold War. So they talked, people talked a lot more, these politicians talked a lot more with each other during the Cold War, which is worrying, because if diplomacy breaks down, you get war. And if you get a war between nuclear powers, you get a nuclear war, and then it's all over. Yeah. So to wrap this up, my view is this: of course, Putin is to blame for this war, but leaving it there is just naive and short-sighted, because all wars are born from situations that are caused by more than one party. And you might think, well, Hitler, but if you look at World War II, basically what happened after World War I, after Germany lost, the Treaty of Versailles was so harsh, to the German state and to a very young, this is why, very young German national feeling and pride. It very much slapped down that pride, and it was also way too harsh economically. And then you had the problem, you had the Great Depression, right? The crash, and people were really hurting, and Germany was hurting worse than everybody else, because we had to pay huge reparations, and this whole situation made Hitler possible. It created a situation in Germany that made Hitler possible. If the Peace of Versailles hadn't been this harsh, and hadn't hurt German national feelings so much, and hadn't caused so much economic pain, and people literally starving in the streets, then Hitler would not have been possible. People wouldn't have listened to his very shrill agitation and propaganda. And in the same way, I feel NATO and the EU created a situation in Ukraine that led to this war, right? So they're not responsible for starting the war, but if you just assume it's all Putin, that would be very, like, you wouldn't understand the situation very well. So it's not like, I'm not saying, Versailles caused Hitler. So I'm not saying the people who wrote the peace treaty of Versailles, are responsible for Jews being gassed. Of course not. That was Hitler. But they created a geopolitical sphere that Hitler could exploit. And that Hitler used to his advantage. And the same here. I think Putin is also thinking he's using this situation to his advantage. If that actually is happening, I don't know. But if you want to understand this, and if you do not want to be like the German foreign minister, and you want to be sitting there and thinking, why, I have no idea what happened here. If you actually want to understand it, then that's the way to go, right? To also see what the West did to cause this. Again, listening to this podcast, people will probably get the opinion or the idea that I have the opinion that, it's all the NATO's and EU force. I don't think that, the war is Russia's fault. But we don't need to talk about that, I feel, very much, because that's very obvious. They invaded the country. Their tanks started rolling. I don't need to give you arguments why I think Putin is at fault for starting the war. That is obvious. What is not obvious is the other side, I feel. And, also you're hearing that Putin has started the war everywhere, if you're in the West, in the media. And there's no talk about, what we did when Euromaidan happened and how that might have been not the right thing to do. Anyway, with that, let's quickly talk about what we know about the current situation in Ukraine. And this is quite hard to do because there are not many good independent sources. Actually, I think this is also Tagesschau. I probably should stop reading Tagesschau because they're bad. Although this was really funny. So I think the war started and they were reporting on it on the first day. And on the second day, they had a big banner on their website which linked to an article where they said, so you need to understand that all the information we're giving you here, we've got from official government sources of Ukraine and Russia. So that's what they wrote, which means propaganda, right? Official sources in war are guaranteed to be propaganda. You don't need to study history or politics to know this. If you don't know this, just believe me. That's when propaganda is at its highest. And so basically, they admitted to that they were just copying down propaganda because apparently they had no own people there, which is probably because they also were surprised, like the German government. They also were not at the BND meeting, and not that there would be, but they were also surprised they didn't have people in place to report on this. So we know very little about troop movements, of the Russians and about defensive efforts of the Ukrainians from independent journalists. There's a lot of this based on government information, propaganda, and on smartphone footage from some guy where you can't verify if this is propaganda and you never know. Which cracked me up because 2 days later, or a day later even, on the same website, they had one of these stories, which is one of these fact-checked stories, where they were like, this is why you shouldn't believe anything, right? There's lots of fake news going around, so don't believe the fake news, believe us. And I'm like, seriously? 2 days ago, you told me your only sources were the fucking government propaganda, and now you're saying don't listen to the fake news on social media. Like, you're the same fake news. You just recently admitted that you're not more trustworthy. Like, what the fuck? So anything you hear about this currently is you have to be very, very careful. With that in mind, I think what we kind of know is that the Russian advance seems to have largely stopped or been slowed down. I got a map in the show notes. This is the state of today, 3rd of March. So you can basically say, I mean, this is like a 3-pronged assault, right? So if you look at Ukraine, the Russians attacked from 3 areas. They attacked from Crimea, which, they had annexed and they have military bases there. They attacked from the Luhansk and Donetsk area, which is this is the independent people republics. And then, they did also attack from the Russian border. So maybe 4-pronged. And then they attacked from the north, from Belarusia towards Kiev. And those are kind of like the movement. And then, of course, they bombed everything from the air and with artillery, as you would do. I was actually surprised because today they're reporting, they've completely bombed, which was it? Which city was it? They weren't talking about Kiev. They were talking about Kharkiv, I think, which was it's completely. They really bombed, and they were like, oh, this looks like the Chechen war. It's horrible for the civilian population, which it is. But I mean, I was surprised that they didn't do that on the first day. I mean, all I know from a military strategy is if you do a conventional tank warfare tank like this, you capture territory, but then you come to a city. What you do is you shell that city for a day or two till everything's in fucking rubble, and then you drive your tanks in. So it seems like the Russians captured Kherson and Melitopol. It seems like there were reports yesterday that they captured Mariupol, which is on the Azov Sea down there. But apparently that is still contested. Kharkiv is contested. And obviously Kiev is under Ukrainian control, but is being heavily bombed. I think that video you could see of the TV tower. I think that was in Kiev where they bombed the TV tower. Jonathan says, I saw a great Twitter thread about maps and that terms under party control and has party presence are all very muddled. Yeah, I think people just don't really know, right? You don't know. Even if you be there, how do you know who's controlling a city? I think that's basically based on propaganda, basically, right? But I mean, some of this you can actually trust, right? Because you just have to use common sense. If the Russians go we control I don't know, Kharkiv, and then it turns out they're wrong, or it gets disproven, then that is not good for their further propaganda efforts. So I don't know. What I found very, very really cracked me up was the news Chernobyl has fallen. Who the fuck cares? There were actually news. I think this was the BBC. They were like, oh my god, radiation in Chernobyl. But what? How? Chernobyl is not a active nuclear reactor. It's fucking encased in a huge dome. The Russians could probably bomb that directly and it wouldn't do anything. That's the last thing you need to worry about. Worry about the fucking Ukrainian power plants that are still active. Aren't there still I think Ukraine is still, I don't know if it's Ukraine, might be Belarus, but there's still one former Soviet country that is running at least one power plant that is of that Chernobyl design, which is horrible. Yeah, so obviously this map, you have to take this with a truckload of salt. But I mean, I think it shows the general attacks, the general, the way the war's been going, and I think you can kind of tell that it's. I feel like if I was to analyze this, right, I would say it looks to me like this invasion is slower than probably the Russian military leaders and the Kremlin expected. But I think it's also very clear that Russia will win this war. I mean, Russia is just so much bigger. I mean, if they could just dig in and do this in 10 years. But stuff like, quickly controlling territory, if it's just territory for a short time, I think they have not that many issues. They have more modern tanks. They have better tanks. They recently, I think Russia right now has pretty much the most modern main battle tank. The Armata, the T-14 Armata is pretty much the state of the art in tank warfare right now. I don't think they have that many. I haven't seen actually a sighting of one in Ukraine, but they are very good, well equipped for this. But I think if they're gonna go into cities, it's gonna be bloody. The Ukrainian president has already called for guerrilla warfare, and that would be the thing to do right now. Guerrilla warfare, urban warfare. You could make the Russians pay quite a heavy toll for trying to control these cities. Because just look at the two Chechen wars. The Russians have a lot of experience in this because they've been through this before, but this also means they know how bloody it can be. Which is probably also because why they're bombing everything to rubble, because that's basically how they won in Chechnya at the end. Borglet says, I think that they think that tanks disturbed soil in Chernobyl. That's why radiation spiked for a day or two. Yeah, but in the greater sense of things, who fucking cares? But those reports are just, yeah. I mean, this it's because it's just the reports were bad, right? Because somebody who doesn't know what's going on, they're like, oh my god, Chernobyl is gonna explode. Because they don't know that it's been encased in fucking concrete and then in a huge dome and whatever. I would say, if I had to analyze this now, I'm not a military historian, obviously, but it looks to me from the general military posture that the Russians are displaying and from the equipment they're using, that their goal is, and this is actually something Putin said as well, that their goal is just basically to break Ukrainian resistance, basically to topple the government. I don't think they're there to hold territory. And I don't think they can. I don't think they have I'm not sure actually they have a big enough military. What I learned just recently, which just blows my mind, is that the German okay, let's look at what's military spending. Let's not lie. Military spending by country, right? So if you look at military spending by country, you have the US is in first place with $700 billion, 778. Then you have China, India, and on 4 you have Russia, and Russia is at 61 billion. Germany is at 52. So we spent 10 billion less than the Russians, basically 5%. And our military is fucked. Our tanks don't drive. We're fucked. We have assault rifles that when they get hot, you can't shoot them anymore. You can't hit shit. But the Russians, they're just invading Ukraine. Just imagine the Bundeswehr was trying to invade Ukraine right now, right? They wouldn't have gotten 10 meters. we immediately need the Americans to bail us out and to fix the tanks or whatever. But yeah, it's I think the Russians are also not set up, especially not with the forces they have there, to hold territory. I don't think that's what they want. I think what they're trying to do, if I had to look at this, I think they're doing a two-pronged thing. They're trying to capture as much territory as they can in the south and the east, which is probably the easiest because there they have the most support by the local population. And then they're obviously trying to surround Kiev and break Kiev and you know, oust the government. And I don't think they can be stopped by sending Ukraine weapons. Because while you can, I think, prevent the Russians almost indefinitely from occupying the country, especially the cities, by, you know, just doing urban warfare where, you know, your fucking Armata doesn't help you much, then where it's man on man, that's what urban warfare is. I think, I mean, can't be stopped. You know, if the Americans went, okay, we send our full military, we're just gonna do we're trying to do a non-nuclear war, which I don't think would work. But like, you know, I think we'd have a nuclear war on our hands. But I think if we had a conventional war, I think the Americans could you know, bail the Ukrainians out. But like, I think as with these two parties engaged in the war, I think the Russians will win this because, I mean, the only thing they need to do is oust the government, right? So they just need to fucking flatten Kiev and just get rid of the government and or cause, and I think that's also what they're doing, which is horrible. Cause just civilian losses and humanitarian disasters and kill civilians, because that will you know, basically force Ukraine and the government to into talks, which are happening. Yeah. And I think just speaking from my personal opinion here, I think what Germany needs to do is need to help with these talks. And what we need to do now is, because this is a disaster for the civilian population and there are people dying, what we need to do now is we need to stop this war. We don't need to send them more weapons. This is not what we need to do. We need to stop this war and then sort everything out afterwards. Right? Don't care about the Ukraine being in the EU or whatever. Like, even the Ukraine existing as a state, this is something you can sort out afterwards. What you need to do now is you need to stop people from dying. And so we need a way. We need to stop with the fucking propaganda, and we need a way to, you know, this vilifying of Vladimir Putin as some kind of like a monster. And it's the same thing they did to Hitler, right? Which is absolutely bullshit, because the really scary thing about Hitler is that he wasn't a monster, and I don't think he was even that much of a psychopath. I think he was just a normal human. And Hitler shows you to what extent people will go for power. And he was probably a sadist. You know, he was probably a very a masochist probably. He was definitely not the submissive part in the relationship. But essentially a human being, and that's even more scary than just saying he's some kind of a monster, because it's scary because that means that humans are capable of this kind of thing, and you see that in history again and again. But nonetheless, we need to find a way to stop this diplomatically, because there's no other way. There's no conventional way. If the Russians don't want to stop this, I mean, there is a way where you could somehow force the Russians into the Russian population into withdrawing their support, and that, you know, that's what they're trying with the sanctions and whatever. I don't want to talk about that in this show. I can do an episode about that at some point. But other than that, you know, assuming that there's resolve in the Russian population to see this war through, there's no way to stop the Russians short of a nuclear war, and we all don't want that. And I personally believe, I could be completely wrong about this because I'm not an expert on Russia, but I believe that the Western view of this is only Putin, and most of the Russians don't support this war is wrong. And, I could be completely wrong about this, and I know I have a lot of Russian listeners. Probably most of them would have the opposite opinion. And if you want to write in, please do. privatecitizen.press, contact details. Please, I will link this in the show notes. Actually, I'm going to write this down. So I'll do this. I forgot about this. I wanted to do this. So in the feedback section, I'm going to make a note here about whistleblower form. So I have an anonymous whistleblower contact form. And I wrote a blog post how to use that. I'm going to link that because you can't just use it. You have to be careful about where to access it from, stuff like that. So, it might be prudent if you're in Russia to use that. I don't want you to get any repercussions. Protect yourself. That's the highest priority. But then if you want to talk to me about this and you want to give me some opinions, please do. I would value that very much because, part of this is... we need a dialogue. That's what diplomacy is. But not only do we need diplomacy between states, we need a dialogue between people, right? I want to talk to Ukrainians. I want to talk to Russians. I want to understand this. And the more we talk to each other, the more we see that we're all just humans. And the less of this shit will happen, right? Because the people who support this kind of thing, they tend to see people from other countries as less than human or something like this. And the more they see that they're just, all the same, we're all just brothers and sisters and all the same, the less something like this will happen. But on the bottom line, I do think there's more support for this kind of thing in Russia than we'd believe in the West. It's kind of how, it's kind of the same phenomenon where probably, Trump voters were underestimated. Because the media tends to be in quite liberal areas, in the U.S., in California, in New York, and stuff like that, on the East Coast and in California, and then they tend to overlook that there's a hell of a lot of people living in between who have different opinions. Same in Germany. I see this mostly with energy politics. Where the politicians and everybody in the media is like, oh yeah, we need to get rid of gas and stuff like that, and they overlook that there's a lot of people who are just like farmers in the middle of nowhere, actually fucking need diesel to go somewhere, and who have completely different problems that are often overlooked. And I feel like there are, just from what I've read in the last 10, 20 years, there are probably a lot of nationalist Russians who also don't feel comfortable about this NATO encroachment. And, some of them might even think like there's a view that people have that Ukraine is always part of Russia and should be part of Russia. I don't know. I think, I don't know about that. Plot twist, Putin just wants to join the NATO and flip it on China and North Korea. I think that's a wish. That's wishful thinking. That from the West, I don't think Putin. I think Putin has a lot more in common with China. I just read where was this? I can't remember. I think it was an article. It might have been on a podcast. Can't remember. Let's assume it was an article. I read about like the worst case scenario for the West ever would be if Russia and China joined forces. And they have a lot in common, including like communism, or past rooted in communism, even though at that point, the cooperation was always bad between Russia and China. But if that ever worked out, we'd be fucked. There'd be like such a economic and military powerhouse. We'd just give up. I'm sitting on Russian and Ukrainian streams for the last week, says Borglet in Twitch chat. Obviously, it's kind of obvious to me that there's a big language barrier. Streamers in the USA getting crumbs of information. It's bizarre to witness. Yeah, I think we have the... I also thought about this a lot recently. Back in the day, World War II, you just didn't have any information, right? That wasn't propaganda because there was literally only propaganda on the airways. I think now we have too much information. There's just so much. Like even if you say, okay, there's actually no propaganda and all of this, like eyewitness reports are real. There's so much coming in that it doesn't help you. Like you can't fucking analyze. You can't analyze from that how the war is going, and what is happening. I think the only thing we can say for sure that it's a fucking humanitarian crisis. I mean, there's a million refugees now coming to the European Union, whatever. That's, by the way, that's one thing I want to say. I am actually afraid of them actually, the Ukraine asked for EU membership. I mean, that would be the biggest mistake ever, I believe. That happens, like we're setting us up for another Cold War. It's going to be the EU against Russia, and the EU is not up for this. It is that would be a disaster of epic proportion, especially because the EU has its own fucking problems. I mean, we got enough countries that we need to, we need to pull through, like Greece and stuff like that. Like we don't need another country that's basically fucked. I mean, even before this war, to be honest, Ukraine was pretty fucked. There was there's a lot of corruption going on there. Like if you just look at, I just know Ukraine always popped up because, I do IT security. And if you do a little bit organized crime stuff, which I got into because of, like ransomware and shit like that, Ukraine pops up all over the place. Prostitution, porn, human trafficking, drugs, weapon sales. If you want to hire hitmen, they're all from the Ukraine. Fucking all the fucking cybercrime stuff down there. If you wanna unload bitcoins that you've gotten, it's like it's always Ukraine. It's like Ukraine. Like even before this war, it was a fucking mess. Like we don't need that in the EU. Actually, I think if the Ukraine joins the EU, I'm gonna vote for the whatever the Dexit party is gonna be, and I'm serious about this. It would be a disaster of epic proportions. Not only from the geopolitical point of view, right? From getting us into a new Cold War, like just an economic point of view. Like Germany's already like pulling more than its weight in the EU, and we certainly have our own troubles, but like that would just be I know they asked for European Union membership, but that doesn't mean, I think actually technically they can't get membership. I think that there's like some, but whatever, like we don't have to give it to them. That's the whole point. And yeah, that would be. I mean, I'm pretty sure they ask, but like, I mean, it is also like lots of states now asking to, like Moldova, I think, or whatever, it's another small country down there, now wants to join NATO and whatever. I think they also asked for NATO membership. I mean, yeah. NATO, the alliance, if you attack one of our members, we have to strike back, and then it's going to be nuclear war. Yeah, let's take a country that's currently being attacked by Russia and make that a NATO member. That is great. If you really want nuclear war, that's the way to go. Joining the EU is more of a process. Yeah, it says Johnson. Yeah, it is. But like, I don't, it's just like, I mean, I know that, for example, German politicians are open to this, and I'm like, what the fuck? What, like, stop reading books about gender politics and read some fucking history book, you numbskulls. What the fuck are you doing? It's a mess. But yeah, so that's I don't know. We don't know that much that's going on, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. Obviously, I got some links in the show notes if you want to know about there's Wikipedia has a timeline for what it's worth, for how much we can trust it. There's some maps. I got a link to the tank encyclopedia if you want to look up current Russian tanks, which if you like me, if you're into Sabaton and World of Tanks, might be interesting. Right. Let's talk about the feedback. I'm saying this because I don't know. Forgot which is this the normal bumper? I think this is still the normal bumper. I don't know how to do this show anymore. It's embarrassing. There's always, obviously, a lot of feedback came in when I was writing my book, and still I haven't looked at everything. My emails overflowing, the forums overflowing, but I'm working through it. And we first had Steve Hose wrote me an email, been a long time supporter of the show. He says, so things are crazy in Europe. He's from the US. Germany is stepping up defense spending, diversifying natural gas. By that he means we're building LNG terminals to buy your gas, the Russian gas, which is, by the way, something Trump pushed for, and selling weapons to Ukraine. Yeah. I think it might be time for an episode that is just a state of the union from the man on the street in Europe. Well, I gave you my view, which isn't so much man on the street. It's more like hobby historian in COVID isolation. SARS-CoV-2 isolation, I'm sorry. Nobody has COVID here. Not yet, or hopefully not yet. Knock on wood. And then Stephen also asked me, I'd like to know your opinion of DW, Deutsche Welle. I watch Deutsche Welle and BBC for news, mostly because compared to the US news stations, they seem even-handed and have more world news. US news people seem to put a cat stuck in a tree on the news before war in Africa. Africa? What is that? Never heard of no Africa. Yeah, so Deutsche Welle, I have to say, I don't. My opinion of Deutsche Welle is not very high. Some of this is historically because Deutsche Welle was very much the German. Voice of America, which, Voice of America was a CIA outfit. Deutsche Welle was also pretty much a spy outfit. It's propaganda. Deutsche Welle was, during the Cold War, was a propaganda news service. And it was, it was founded to promote German interests, basically. It has transitioned to being a normal, if you could call that, a public broadcaster. But it actually only used to be a few years ago. I think I talked about this on the show some point. It's just a few years ago that they actually changed their whole charter and everything, whatever their incorporation thing, to be truly independent. So they're now truly independent. So I don't know. I'm not saying they're propaganda or more than anybody else these days. Or willing propaganda like they used to be in the Cold War. I'm wary of them because of those historic reasons, and then I have a very personal reason to not like them, because when I was in Bonn, I always kind of wanted to be a journalist, but when I was studying, I didn't do an internship like everybody for free, because that's why I didn't become a journalist then, because I had a well-paying IT job that I did during my studies. And I was like, I can either get like €10.50 an hour, or I can get nothing an hour. So I'm going to do this. But I know quite a few people who went to Deutsche Welle or wanted to go to Deutsche Welle. They are situated in Bonn. And it was basically like a government job back then. And everybody who went there just wanted to go there because it's a safe job, not because they wanted to do good journalism. That's not really something I like. So I'm wary of them. But on the other hand, as you said, if you're in the US, it's bound to be better European news than whatever CNN puts on the air. It's going to be better than Tucker Carlson, I guess. So, that's my opinion of Deutsche Welle. If I have listeners who work for Deutsche Welle and they disagree, or somebody else disagrees, please, private citizen.press. You know me. I want your opinion. I'm not prepared to say I was wrong. And then we had an interesting discussion, prompt by episode 108. It's very lighthearted now. This is all about Canadian accents. We had Petit Michel is responding and says, read the Canadian maritime accent. I don't know about Bud. That may be a PEI thing. But buddy was really common. It always annoyed me being called it from associating it with the possibly unique way of using it as a subject in sentences along the lines of, then buddy goes and takes a leak behind the statue with the frigging cops in full view. Kind of pejoratively. My mom might correct me, but I'd say the PEI accent is pretty close to the mainland Nova Scotia accent. To get a sense of that, watch an episode of Trailer Park Boys. I've watched many episodes of Trailer Park Boys in my life. I have to say, when I started watching, I had no idea that I was Canadian. I just thought they were American hillbillies. I'm sorry. The main characters are caricatures, though some guys really talk like that. But I don't hear the accent in others, which must mean it's more or less the mainstream accent. There's variation, though. Somehow the Cape Breton accent is quite different from the PEI one, despite them both being islands near each other. Well, they're islands. Island people. They're like mountain people. They're weird. They develop their own culture very quickly. Then I could sometimes barely understand my grandfather's Grand Manon accent. I don't even know where that is. That's more like the most northeast state in the US accent. I know about the Maine accent because of Stephen King. Maine is weird. If you broaden out to Atlantic Canada to include Newfoundland, then it gets really interesting. They have a whole vernacular and accent distinct enough to attract attention of linguists. Oh, so kind of like East Frisian, probably. The commentary for a Newfoundland detective show called Republic of Doyle described the respect they had for their Irish cast member Sean McGinley for having mastered it. Often people try, but always they fail. For example, Russell Crowe was nice enough to cameo on the show, which they loved, but his attempt was quite poor. Well, he is Russell Crowe. I feel like he can't even pull off American convincingly. To the Steve B, who also is originally from Canada, I think, although lives in the US, replied, as I've actually just finished listening to his podcast, I will directly answer Fab's question about his attempt at a maritime accent. I do not think there is one single accent. New Brunswick has a very slight accent. I need to talk to Deadly Slob. There's no way around this. I need to interview him. New Brunswick has a very slight accent that you could probably copy, as does Nova Scotia. The wildcard here is Newfoundland, he says too. Newfie is the Canadian equivalent of Mississippi in the States. While the words you said would be stereotypical of something I have actually heard them say, they're very easygoing. The sound of them saying it leaves the average person staring and wondering what was said. If we have an actual Newfie here, it would be great if they would send Fab a recording of actual Newfie talk. I'm down for this. Please do this. I'm told a possible comparison would be a German speaker listening to Bavaria. Yeah, Bavaria is just fucking weird. No idea what they're saying when they're talking. Anyway, we also had these two guys, the Canadian producers, also had in another topic, a much more serious discussion about the trucker protests, which is one of the topics I definitely want to talk about, especially after they started cutting off their money. The banks and all that. That's prime private citizen, like New World Order, Great Reset bullshit that we need to talk about. So I've always been reading that thread. So please keep me updated on the trucker protest. I would have made that the first show if Putin, the asshole, hadn't attacked Ukraine. Oh, by the way, Vladimir, if you are listening, right? I got the Russian friend here who wants to tell you something.
Ублюдок, мать твою! А ну иди сюда, говно собачье! Решил ко мне лезть? Ты засранец вонючий, мать твою, а? Ну иди сюда, попробуй меня трахнуть, я тебя сам трахну, ублюдок, анонист чертов! Будь ты проклят! Иди, идиот, трахать тебя и всю семью! Говно собачье, жлоб вонючий! Дерьмо, сука, падла, иди сюда, мерзавец! Негодяй, гад, иди сюда, ты говно! Жопа!
That's what we think about attacking Ukraine on the private citizen. Suka blood! Anyway, please, if you have something to tell me about this, about anything really, please do. Please contact me. I appreciate feedback. It's the best thing ever. And I will put a link to all of that. There's a link to everything. If you go to the show notes, privatecitizen.press, this episode /109, there's a producer feedback section down below all the feedback. It has links to everything. I will put a specific link to the blog post about the whistleblower contact form into this episode for obvious reasons. Better do a Russian army ship, go fuck yourself meme. It's epic. I haven't seen that one. Yes, so please do that. And with that, we come to the end of the show, which means we have to talk about everybody who helped make it happen. Borklet says, I'm missing out on the memes. Yeah, there's a reason I'm missing out on the memes. I cut myself off the internet for a month, or as much as I could, to finish my novel, which was very painful, by the way. I have a newfound appreciation for people who write novels, I have to say. It doesn't make sense to George R.R. Martin yet, not after his naked jumping on the trampoline, just giving a big middle finger to his fans, basically, but everybody else. Anyway, let's talk about, people who support this show. And, I have to thank everybody profoundly, because I've been not doing episodes a month, and I didn't have a single Patreon supporter jump off the ship. They were all like, he's going to come back, and we're going to keep paying him. And I think that's great. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I cannot say thank you enough for the trust. As I said, I will make up all these episodes to you post haste. So if you want to support the show, there's a Patreon. It starts at a very small amount. It's like a monthly thing. It starts at basically $1 plus taxes. There you can support me with more, but just anything helps. I'm trying to stay afloat here. Petrol is €2 a liter now in Germany, which is great, because I was like, hey, they're starting to have events again, right? So I'm a freelancer, right? And paying the bills with journalism is hard. So I went into hosting live events, which pays better, and I'd love doing. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can earn some money. And I started doing it. Bam, pandemic happens. It's all gone. And now finally we have live events again, but that means I actually have to go somewhere, drive somewhere, whatever. And it's like, no, the petrol's expensive, and I still haven't bought a graphics card. I still need I need a graphics card. I need Elden Ring. So you guys need to support me. And I thank everybody who does. And my voice giving out, so I still have something to lubricate. Jonathan says, we just like giving you money to fuck around. It's not a podcast subscription. Dude, whatever. If it makes you happy and it helps me do what I like doing, it's isn't it awesome? Yes, but if you don't want to do a monthly thing, whatever, you can also, I got a PayPal address, producers@fab.industries. That also works. Oh my God, Jonathan just gifted, what? Oh, and I have the alerts off because I'm recording a podcast. Thank you, Jonathan. Obviously, recording this on Twitch. And this was going to be the next thing I'm going to do. Thank everybody. And thank my Twitch subscribers. Jonathan is one. So he just gifted how many? You're gifting 5 subscriptions. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it very much. I'm sorry the alerts are off. Thank you. Also, you know what I appreciate? I know for a fact that Jonathan probably doesn't agree with quite a lot of things I've said today, but he's still supporting me, and then that's amazing. Anyway, let's thank everybody. That's how the value for value model works. So thanks to all my Patreon subscribers and everybody who supported the show via PayPal. For this episode, those people are Georges, Steve Hose, who wrote in earlier, Butterbeans, Michael Small, Rodane the Insane, Jonathan M. Heavy, hello Jonathan, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave 1I11G, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Jackie Plage, Philipp Klostermann. This mix of German and English names always throws me off, or what I presume is kind of like German English. IKN, Bennett Piata, Sandman616, Vlad, Tobias, Mode 7, Kai Sears, Joe Poser, Fadi Mansour, Dirk Didi, Rizal, Avis, David Potter, Mika, Mr. Amish, Cam, Dave Amrish, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan, RJ Tracy, Rick Bragg, Captain Eckhead, Astral C, Robert Foster, Superuser D, and no reply. Gonna need to teach him how to pronounce my last name at some point. How do you pronounce it? Hete? Hete? I mean, I always pronounce your name English, to be honest. Jonathan M. Heathy. So it'd be like Jonathan M. Hetai. Oh, it's like hentai. Okay, I'm just gonna call you Jonathan Hentai from now on. Hetai. What is this? Just while we edit, and I mean this show's been going on for long enough anyway. Where's that from? Is that like it? What kind of German area is that from? It sounds like Hessian, weirdly. I don't know, but I don't know if I'm right. I'm trying to find. I did a layout error in the show notes. I'm trying to fix that at the same time. Earliest known ancestor, French musketeer. Apparently, that's pretty badass. French musketeer, who apparently liked hentai. I mean, I can't blame him. I'm might be a connoisseur of hentai myself. Anyway, let's thank all my Twitch subscribers. This is excluding the people Jonathan just gifted subscription to, because they weren't in the show notes. But you all be mentioned next episode, which is gonna be next week. So I'm gonna take care of that then. Thanks to Mike the Dane, JonathanMH_.com, Mr. Hentai himself, Mod 7's Unavailable, Galtaran, Alturestus Jim, Bacon the Pork, and Redeemer F, who was also in chat today. And I have to thank Bytemark, who's providing me their UK cloud hoster, bytemark.co.uk. And they're providing me with the bandwidth and the storage for the audio files for the podcast, which is very important. And I probably couldn't do the show if I had to pay for that. Especially if I wanted to keep up the amazing quality they have. Now, I had quite a scare over this month where I was away with Bytemark, because I think they changed the energy prices obviously went up, and they increased their prices, and I got an email that I have to pay for everything now, and I was like, holy shit! Now I can't do the show. I have to go begging the listeners, otherwise we can't do the show anymore. But I did write them, and it was just a mistake, and they took care of it very quickly. Even though the guy who back in the day, when I was doing Linux Outlaws, Bytemark approached us and said, we want to give you some servers so you can do this, and you don't have to pay for this shit, and it's gonna be shit quality, whatever. And so you're independent. And the guy who approached us back in the day has left Bytemark long ago. But they're still committed to helping independent podcasters, helping free speech, which I think is very important. So please, if you're looking for a cloud server, go to Bytemark, bytemark.co.uk, and they're amazing. I've been running these servers since, oh god, it must be 10 years now, probably. And I can remember one time they were down. Like one time a hard drive failed. And so they were down for like 2 hours. And that was it. They're fast. It's amazing. So Bytemark are amazing. And that's it. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to be back next week, hopefully Wednesday. Unless, unless I really get sick with SARS-CoV-2 now. Although, it's been going for so many days now with like mild symptoms. I feel like I'm beating it. But yeah, I'll be back with regular episodes. I'll make up the episodes I didn't do. We're going to talk more about Ukraine in the future probably. And it's going to be some privacy topics. It's going to be some IT security stuff's coming up on the horizon. We'll talk about the truckers, which I think is pretty important. At some point, we're going to get Mike back on and talk about climate change. So lots to do in the future. Happy to be back. Thanks for listening. Thanks that you were here today in Twitch chat, listening to the podcast. So I'm gonna obviously some other credits I have to mention here. The theme song Acoustic Roots for the show, written and recorded by Raoul Kabzali. And I'm gonna play us out as usual with some Epidemic Sound licensed music. And this is a song called Symphony of the Fallen by Anthony Earls. I thought it was fitting today. So yes, see you soon. And if you're in Ukraine right now, make sure you're safe. Get your fucking family out there. Get out of there. Come over to Germany. We have space. We have food. We've got heat until the Russians kill all the gas. And and if you're staying, aim to misbehave. All right, that's it for the show. And as you can see, first, pause this. As you can see, we will raid Helifa now, of course, who is looking very Instagrammy there with her filter. She's probably building some nightmarish pedestrian bicycle city. She's playing City Skylines. Yeah, it's not the cities I built, where they're all about cars and roads and getting from A to B very quickly in a car. Oh, one topic, I forgot to mention this. One topic I'm also going to talk about very soon is the Drachenlord. We need to talk Drachenlord again. Drachenlord is on the run. It's quite hilarious. That's going to be a fun episode. Public transport hippie bullshit. Yes, indeed. Let's go to Halifa with some public transport hippie bullshit. I'll see you soon. At some point, I'm going to do some game streaming again. Don't know when yet. I still want to finish that novel. Yeah, let's see what Halifa is doing. See you soon. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And goodbye. Where's the button?